Welcome to another edition of RCE. I'm your host, Brock Palen, and a couple of comments before we get started. SC is coming up in November, and I will be there. I won't be at a booth. I'll be walking around. I'll be tweeting while I'm there, and my Twitter name is BROCKPALEN, Brock Palen, and you can find that on the RCE website if you want at rce-cast.com. Also, again, Jeff is helping me out, and I believe Jeff will be there also. Jeff, what will you be doing at SC?
Yeah. Yes, I'll be there. I'll have my usual open MPI buff where we're going to talk about State of the Union, where we've been, where we are, where we're going with my co-host of George Basilica from University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I'll probably be spending quite a bit of time in the Cisco booth, too. I think we're number 1847, somewhere in the middle of the floor there somewhere. But so please, people, drop by, say hello.
Okay, yeah, no, that buff, I'm at that pretty much every year, and that's actually where we originally met, and I always learn something new that you guys did every year that I come back and use pretty heavily. So.
Cool. Well, I don't know if I'll be tweeting from the show or not. I do have a Twitter account. It's J Squyres, but random little fact, I actually got that for API testing purposes, not really for tweeting purposes, and a bunch of people started following me, and so I kind of figured, like, okay, guess I really should do something professional with this account. So every once in a great while I tweet on there, and maybe I'll do something during SC, but it's more likely I'll put some stuff on my blog while I'm there. Okay.
But our show for today is Silo. It's a file data storage format. I've never used it. I learned about it from the Visit guys when we had them on the show. And we have with us Mark Miller from Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And we can get Mark to introduce himself and give us a little bit of background on what Silo is and his own background. That'd be great. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Brock, and thanks, Jeff. Yes, Silo is basically an I/O library and scientific database. It's primarily an interface for reading and writing scientific data in terms of meshes, the typical finite element, finite different types of meshes that we deal with, and then variables defined on those meshes, piecewise linear, piecewise constant, or in other terminology, zone-centered and node-centered variables on those meshes. And development of Silo started at Livermore Labs probably in the early 90s, I think. The earliest C code in the Silo source code, I think, is around 92. And it's been developed by a number of different developers over time. Many of them are on the Visit team also. And it's been enhanced, and more recently, I've become responsible for maintenance and enhancements of Silo in the past few years.
Okay, so what is your own personal background? Have you been doing file formats before, been working at HPC for a long time, sysadmin, programmer, user? What's your own, how do you get started in this?
Right. Well, actually, when I first started at Livermore Labs about 18 years ago, one of my first responsibilities was to sort of redesign one of the underlying I/O drivers in Silo. Well, not so much redesign it, but reconfigure it. We were at the time we were using a library called PDB. That's not to be confused with Protein Database. It's a portable database written by Stuart Brown at Lawrence Livermore Labs. And at the time, we were trying to find a way to restructure the way we were using PDB in Silo. And so one of my first jobs at Livermore Labs was to do that. And I did a very large analysis of the I/O performance of Silo at the time, including, for example, at the Silo interface, if you issue a call to write a mesh, excuse me, the question is how many real I/O requests does that result to in an actual file on disk? And after reconfiguring the way we were using the underlying libraries a bit, we were able to reduce what I called I/O fragmentation at the time. One call from the client could end up looking like hundreds of I/O calls on disk, and we were trying to reduce the amount of fragmentation that was occurring. And from then on, I have worked with things like MPI-IO. I was really heavily into scalable I/O in the late 90s. Then I worked on some other scientific database software called SAFE as part of the Accelerated Strategic Computing Initiative. And from there, I've been working on Visit primarily, but 75% of my time is on Visit, and about 25% of my time right now is on Silo.
So what was Silo? It was a replacement for PDB, but what was the target for PDB and Silo? Like, is it for a specific project at Lawrence Livermore, or was it supposed to encompass all your data so you had one format for everybody working there?
Right. So when I started at Livermore Labs, we were, and I work in B division, and there's two divisions at the lab that have traditionally tried to share software and run into a number of difficulties in doing that. And one of the ways to achieve sharing of software is to make sure everybody writes their data to basically the same data format. And for many years at Livermore Labs, that didn't even happen within one division. Different code groups would choose different I/O formats, and there are a variety of reasons for why this would happen. But ultimately, Silo was designed so that, for example, within B division at Livermore Labs, all the codes could read and write their data to a common format and then share tools that use that format. So that was the reason that Silo was designed. And you had mentioned PDB. PDB is not sort of designed as a replace, or Silo wasn't designed as a replacement for PDB. It was designed as a sort of an additional level of abstraction on top of PDB. PDB is primarily a library designed to read and write data structures that you would see in a C or C++ application. You know, it reads and writes, linked lists or arrays or structs. That's what PDB is designed to do. And Silo adds an additional level of abstraction on top of that that's specific to scientific computing meshes and variables defined on those meshes.
So when you say meshes, are you talking structured data or unstructured data or both? All kinds. Okay.
All kinds. Silo supports structured, unstructured, gridless meshes. It supports something we call constructive solid geometry. It recently was enhanced to support AMR. As far as I know, it supports the widest variety of scientific computing meshes of any of the I/O libraries I'm familiar with.
Okay, and what kind of applications? You said, scientific computing, but could you give us some specific examples of applications that are using it and how they're using Silo? Or
sure,
a well-known you've got of that.
Well-known application at Livermore Labs is AL3D. That's, an arbitrary Lagrange-Lorentz simulation, and they use that for all sorts of types of simulations. You could, if you wanted to drop some structure, some small object that you're using to transport things around, and understand the impact if it was dropped off of its, carrying apparatus or whatever. You can use AL3D to simulate that and analyze it. Let's see. There's just a number of different simulations, and they're not just within B division now. It turns out that the engineering department at Livermore Labs uses Silo. A number of other since Silo was relatively successful within B division, it's branched out and used by, a number of different simulations codes, whether they're structural dynamics. It'd be hard to list all the different applications it's used for, but there's quite a number just within Livermore Labs, and then external to the labs, it's used in a number of different places. Often, Visit is the trigger for using Silo for someone that's new to this whole world. They find Visit, they want to use it, and they hear about Silo and say, "Oh, well, let's use Silo to store our data." I know I didn't give you a complete answer there, but.
Oh no, that's great. That's great. Let me dive down a little bit and ask a little deeper technical question here. So, the API that you export, assumedly you have some kind of handle that represents a data structure, and you can read and write to that. But what is, and please correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but follow on to that is, how do you actually get the data in the program? What language bindings do you export, and what kind of is the flavor of reading and writing the data while it's still in RAM in your managed data structures?
Right. So the answer to the binding question is Silo supports basically a C interface and a Fortran interface. A number of people who use Silo and have used it for many years would like to see a natural C++ interface added to Silo, and we may do that eventually. But right now, just C and Fortran. And what you get, the most important handle object, thingy that you need to have in a Silo client is the file handle. So you do a DB open or a DB